I prefer walking in the woods by myself because I find talking distracting. By carefully listening while on these walks, I realize I'm really not alone. I'm being watched by many eyes. A walk in the woods is an invitation for me to participate in another world. A hike in the woods for me is paradise. I learned this at the age of roughly 8 or 9 years old while growing up in Virginia. Whenever I had the feeling of being alone, I would ask Mom if I could go down to the creek and play in the woods. Mom would say, okay, as long as it was back before dark. It was not necessarily what I saw in the woods that I found so interesting. It was more the smells, the sounds, the touches that I experienced that were so pleasurable. There were croaks from bullfrogs and chirps from the birds, the sweet scent of honeysuckle and the earthly smell from the creek, and pricks from brushing against the thorns. Much of what I encountered I could not identify. That was all right. Identifying what I came in contact with was really not all that important for me. What I wanted, though, was to be aware and sense everything. At the end of my adventure, I had this appreciation, this gratitude, that as an outsider, I was given a gift to observe this other world. My experiences at the creek as a youngster created in me a continuous love of nature to this day. Thank you very much. Chris Mueller will be next with her reflections.
Good morning, and happy Easter for those who practice. Earth Day is every day. Earth Day brings up a lot of emotions for me, including feelings of rage about how humans have treated the planet. I struggled to write anything positive, even though I love this planet. Through some self-reflection, I admit that the rage comes from a deep grief. Humans can be such a frustrating mixture of intelligence and complete stupidity. When I am most in my head, I get lost in thoughts of despair and blame and such deep anger. Every psychologist will tell you not to take everything personally, but when it comes to the earth, I do. It's a wound in my heart when I see litter or humans buying one more one-time use material. It's personal because I believe there really is no separation of earth and human life. We are one. We are inextricably linked. And every day I notice the lack of wildness and the increased silence, just as Rachel Carson predicted. When I'm in a more loving heart space, I try to create more room for forgiveness for my human friends, try to see the long view, millennia versus centuries, and try to let go of what little imagined control I have over anything. I come back again to I can only control my own thoughts and actions. Living and noting the sensory experiences of being in the breeze, hands in the soil, sweat on my brow, birdsong in the air, helps me keep a little grounded and is my small spiritual practice. Unfortunately, because I tend to be a glass half empty type, I notice there are fewer birds, fewer bees and other insects, and less quiet space for reflection. It is a discipline to remain mindful of the smallest moment of beauty, and I humbly ask for your support. Earth Day on the calendar makes me think of a birthday when we try to acknowledge someone's specialness and show respect and caring by a gift or message. The earth, as every person who is of importance to us, deserves that love and respect daily. The earth is us. We are the interconnected web with all of life. Our friends and family are also us. If we want to show respect and love, we need to realize our interconnectedness down to the smallest living, non-living organism every day. And I humbly ask for your help. When I joined UUC as a new Unitarian Universalist, I was attracted to the vision of Beacon Food Forest as a way to live in community. Jay gave me hope I would find like-minded folks at UUC, and I wasn't disappointed. I was attracted to the green commitment UUC had made, and although found it needed a reboot, and I have not shied from saying that, I also fortunately have found other social justice commitments here that have kept me at UUC, and I am hopeful that even with our flaws, we can find our way to truly living the green values espoused in our environmental policy and take it even further to each and every one of us, making a personal commitment to live our best green life every day. Today, I would like to propose we all recommit to our green commitment as written in our UUC policy and take it a step further to commit in all actions at UUC, at home, in the community, with relatives and friends, to hold ourselves and each other accountable, similarly to the accountability in our new 8th principle, and do all that we can kindly and respectfully to really reduce, reuse, and only lastly to recycle, educating ourselves about what is truly recyclable. Can we all do our very utmost to leave the smallest carbon footprint possible and take action by whatever means moves us to address climate injustice and dismantle the structures promoting a wasteful and overly consumptive society? Many are already doing a lot, and I encourage each one of us to go deep and do more. Personally, I need your help as my spiritual community to hold me accountable also. My Earth Day birthday wish is to recommit to respect and revere the earth every day as this Ganga White-inspired commitment. My temple is the earth. The forests are my church. The rivers, lakes, and oceans, my holy water. May all humans come to the same reverence. Blessed be. Thank you.
Good morning. While this poem was written just a few months ago, it recounts an experience I had a number of years ago. A special shout out to Krista Tippett and her radio show, which gave me the inspiration for the name of this poem. On Being. As I rounded the corner, there he was, standing in the middle of the road, sunlight filtering through the trees, dancing on his coat. Our eyes instantly locked, barely breathing. We came from two different worlds, mine full of coming, going, wanting, and worry. His full of quiet meadows and burbling brooks. But on that early April morning, we shared just one, the present, being. Finally, the spell was broken, and he turned and loped into the forest, white tail flashing. I've always felt a great affinity to the natural world. Even before I realized I was a UU, I fully embraced the 7th principle and the interdependence of the web of life. That cool April morning, gazing into the eyes of that doe, I never felt more connected to the life force of our universe. Many times in my life, I have felt overwhelmed by the events and disappointments, but it is when I find my way back to nature that I am able to put things in their proper perspective and remember it truly isn't all about me. I've been blessed to see the grandeur of the Grand Canyon, the quiet serenity of the giant sequoia, the calming beauty of the morning glory in my own front yard. It is connecting with nature that has kept me relatively sane my entire life. But our natural world is threatened by greed, by short-sightedness, by constant appetite for more, but mostly of all by our indifference. I have no easy answers, but in this celebration of Earth Day, I want to recommit myself to trying to figure out more ways I can protect the world that has done such a great job of protecting me. And next we'll hear from Ned Bellamy.
Good morning. We thought that maybe Earth Day might be the best time to explore our seventh principle in a little more detail, which invites all of UUs to affirm our respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we're a part. Diagram 1, there we go. Imagine this dot in the center is any one of us, raised in our Western culture of individualism to mostly celebrate our independence rather than our interdependence. The seventh UU principle invites us to consciously modify our perspective of our relationship with the rest of existence, to embrace a more comprehensive and vast, and at the same time, a more humbling and ethical point of view. So this morning, let's challenge our imaginations and the wonders of biology to explore our interdependence with just 3 of these webs with other living beings on Earth, which will have both a temporal and spacious quality of interrelationships and connections that we don't see here. So diagram the second, by the way, which have been expertly designed by Christina. So I don't know how much of that you can see. So essentially this is the temporal vertical line, time, distant future at the very top, where our legacy would lie and our commitment to our descendants. And then at the very, very bottom, and the center, of course, is where we are now, and at the very bottom, our very distant past. So near the center of the vertical line where we reside in the present, we can daily directly access our most current interdependence upon our parents and grandparents and their parents, our most immediate ancestors who made our lives possible. Conservative commentator Bill Buckley reminds us that ingratitude for their gifts of life to us is spiritually atrophying. So let's now look at the more distant line of our ancestors at the very bottom of that page, to our evolutionary past, before recorded time. Patricia Westerford, in her wonderful The Secret Forest, invites us into this deep time and place. And she says, you and the tree in your backyard come from a common ancestor. 1.5 billion years ago, the two of you parted ways. But even now, that tree and you still share 1/4 of your genes. So we humans are actually interrelated with all the more than human beings, plants and animals and fish and birds and insects. And why is that? Because they all shared the same genetic ancestor as we did before each of these plants and creatures branched out in unique ways 330 million years ago in the case of the birds, to adapt to their prehistoric environments. And as a result, all of these beings, in what David Abram described as part of the more than human world of earthly nature, share much of our DNA. As humans, not just chimpanzees, who share 99% of our genes, but even fruit flies and bananas, which still share more than 50% of our human genes after millennia of independent evolution. In fact, we share our DNA through common ancestors with almost all living beings. And so the first interdependent web we've just discussed is our common ancestry with so much of non-human life. And we'll return to the top of the line in that diagram in just a minute. So diagram 3, Jeremy, this horizontal line is the other part of this axis. This is the vertical one with time, and the horizontal one is a present. It represents all the presently living beings, both human and more than human, that share Earth with us today. And at the center of the circles around the present time are our friends and extended families. And members of families are necessarily interdependent upon one another, at least for a while, when the offspring is young, and sometimes interdependent at the end of their parents' or siblings' lives. Now, for millennia, monks and nuns who lived together under the same roof for decades address one another as brothers and sisters and think of themselves as a mutually supportive and very necessary family. But the central question remains for all of us: how on earth can we possibly relate to, less than feel, interdependent with the billions of human strangers near and far who we will never, ever see, less than befriend? Christian writer Anne Lamott says what it means to be saved, if we're to believe Jesus or Gandhi, is to see everyone on earth as family. And Gandhi himself wrote, "The golden way is to be friends with the world and regard the whole human family as one." Fair enough, but how are we to regard strangers as family? Well, Mother Teresa gave us a hint when she said, "The problem with our world is that we draw the circle of family too small." In his 7 Mysteries of Life, science writer Guy Murchie suggested a way to expand how we think about the breadth of the circumference of our family circles. We simply have to be willing to invite all of our distant cousins inside each of our family circles. And he writes, "No human being can be less closely related to every other human than approximately 50th cousin. The family trees of all of us must merge into one genetic tree by the time they've spread into our ancestries for about 50 generations. So, if we're willing to open our hearts and imagine that our family really does include some or all of our unknown and therefore imaginary and long-lost 50th cousins, then our regard for the 7.9 billion human strangers in our midst may shift just a little. So, we've examined the extended human family as our second interdependent web of life. Diagram 4, thanks, Jeremy. The 6th human, the UU source for the UU principles, includes this, and I quote, "The spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions celebrating the sacred circle of life." Nothing comes to my mind as more sacred than the evolutionary tree of life. And this means that we need to reach even beyond our expanded circle of family to include the many trillions of the more than humans in our sacred circle of life, who we mentioned earlier are closely related to our deep ancestry. And so these circles, there's two of them. There's the human family circle towards the middle, and the ancestral circle of life on the outside. And before we go any further, please note that this little diagram is so not to scale. If we assumed all living humans are represented inside this 4-inch diameter circle, the smaller one, this outer circumference of non-human life on Earth is more vast than we can imagine and would extend for miles beyond the octagon. And for example, today we estimate there are 3 trillion individual trees compared to 8 billion individual humans, which is almost 3,000 times as many trees as humans. You get a sense about how out of scale this is. And it's a wonderful opportunity to feel the humility as humans we so rarely do. We mentioned earlier that humans share a common ancestor with almost all other life forms. Well, the primary exception is all bacteria, which is a different life form because its cells do not have a nucleus as do ours. So our third example of our interdependent web with all life is the human being's vital dependence upon each of our microbiomes that we need to process our food. Mostly because we had drawn this before I thought about this one, that little circle around the dot will be our third circle of life here, the microbiome. And this is a more mutually balanced interdependence, us and bacteria, than you might imagine. Specifically, in each of our bodies reside 30 trillion human cells, which generally cohabit successfully with 39 trillion, mostly bacterial cells. So humans really are only 43% human. So these 3 circles are only a metaphoric image to illustrate just 3 webs of our interdependence, but each is grounded upon very real biological relationships. All life is interrelated and independent. And let's show diagram 3 again, please. Thanks, Jeremy. Which brings us back, finally, to our vertical axis of time. This time, at the very top, towards our future legacies that we leave for our descendants. So let's start again at the center of that circle. Every parent I know, particularly in the last couple years, certainly the last decade, has spoken of their concern for their grandchildren's futures, which is another reflection of the gravitational power of our familial small family circle. But 4 centuries ago, the governing body of the 5,000 members of the Iroquois tribe had a way better idea. They challenged themselves to make more durable and wise decisions to be sustainable, not just for their grandkids, but for 7 generations of future children. And we know now, at this point of our ecological climactic emergency, that to begin to restore the Earth's environmental health, will require the concern for and work of many more future generations than 7. We need to plan for a far future horizons, not of 7 generations, but more like St. Matthew's 70 times 7. Celebrating the vastness of our worldwide, species-wide, genetic-wide, interdependent webs with other lives may help us to consciously widen our perceived circle of life. Our challenge is to keep our minds and thereby our hearts open to continuously reignite our willingness and commitment to sacrifice. That is, to sacrifice our comfortable, wasteful, destructive ecological habits, and then to do what needs to be done to begin to heal the earth. Thank you.